Hello, hello, hello. I can finally greet you guys as now a newly minted MS1 about to be MS2. It's been quite a while, obviously. You guys are probably used to it now, but lots and lots to share today. I'm just gonna quickly, I'm just gonna go through how each module was kind of like, a little brush over, a little critique. And yeah, give you guys a little slice of each pie that I've had throughout this semester, this year, more so this semester. It's been quite a semester. It's the first semester I have done, like, it's the Zoom med school era. So, yeah, semester one was in Newcastle. Now, semester two of year one was in good old Ottawa, back at home. Yeah, so I'll just go dive right in with that, and then I'll just quickly go over how a lot has changed since January 2020 when this whole show started. And I'll top off with the three most important things I've taken from this first year of med school. 25% MD. Feels crazy how fast that flew by, but let's just hop in. So, with semester one, what was there? There was FTM, Foundations to Medicine 1 and 2, MSK CPR 1, which was very heart focused, and CPR 2, which was lungs and kidney. So with FTM 1, that was really just a mind-boggling memory mosaic. It was university days with an extra layer or two, just going a little bit deeper, but still pretty much basics. Surprisingly, one of the harder modules for us, for many actually, because of the medley of info presented. I tend to like it, the mosaic, like, everything is so different. So if you've gotten used to, it's not a great thing, to cramming, then it's easier to just, everything's different enough so then you can kind of memorize it. You can cram it and go. Never cram in med school. Learned that lesson, took a while, but never cram. So that was FTM 1. A lot of basics, things that are very dry, in my opinion, but they do come back to haunt you when you get into a lot more clinical things, more concrete examples in later modules, and you refer back to FTM 1, you're like, God dang, now this seems a lot more interesting. So power through it is my advice, and you won't regret it because it'll come back for sure. Then there's the FTM2. It was like a quick visit to the apothecary, a trailer of sorts to the film that will be playing in second year. Lots of names, equations, a lot more genetics, but a lot of drugs. Pretty much that was this module. It was definitely a lot to absorb, but a nice appetizer for what's to come, because I hear in second year it's the drugs hit you hard and really, like, you go intense with it. So, ooh, it'll be quite something, won't it? So that was that. It was very interesting, but there were some concepts like steady state and like getting used to that took a while, but digestible once you expose yourself enough to it. Then we had MSK. Hello, MSK, musculoskeletal module. So it was just hello to med school. It was first time learning proper anatomy ever. If pharmacology was me dipping my toes in the water, anatomy was me slipping right in and getting caught up in the waves. It was like learning a new language in a way, and getting used to the lecture slide format was how the 3 weeks of MSK flew by. It was, I didn't know how to prepare because I'm so used to from undergrad, and even in the first two modules it's like subtitles that, like, subheadings, and you have specific key points and you take that away. Fine. Here you have an image and a bunch of names for different muscles and their actions, and you're just like, how do I study this? It was just very new. But again, exposure, lab time, which I definitely do feel bad for my juniors, like the term ones currently who are now finished term one, congrats to them. They didn't get that, but there's obviously tools and apps, like I've mentioned in my posts previously, that do come in handy. It's definitely about the exposure, and definitely I realized with MSK was just do the questions. When you do the questions, things set in. The muscles, you will remember them. Winged scapula, long thoracic nerve, you will remember it. Like, you see that, yeah. So that was MSK. It was definitely something new, a little overwhelming, but it flew by. And then we have CPR1, which was the heart. This was also during the whole exodus of COVID and all of that. So it was the belly flop module. The heart left me spinning because of how heavy on physiology and somewhat physics it was. Pre-med flashbacks came back flooding in. It was just COVID exodus and mayhem didn't make the heart any more endearing, I must say. But like a lot of things in my life, second time around, second time going through it, second time being exposed to it, it made it a lot more digestible and doable. It was during my BSCE prep. BSCE, by the way, is this cumulative exam that we have at the end of first year, which tests the whole year's content. It's quite the behemoth of an exam, but definitely doable. So when I was preparing for this, in my 1 month study prep, which I will definitely mention ahead for the BSCE, I spent one day on CPR with my study mate and we just went ham at it. And it was not as haunting. I guess it really does make a difference of the stability of the environment you're in. So being at home, or I guess anywhere, as long as there was no mayhem of, having to pack or deal with people leaving, coming, going, that wasn't there. So CPR was not as scary the second time around. And then we moved on to CPR2, which was, like I've mentioned in previous episodes of the podcast, some posts, that I was very determined to love the kidneys and lungs because CPR1 was a slap in the face. It was, it made me really reassess my approach because I was very stubborn. Us med students, we have a certain way of doing things, pre-meds, and that had to be gone. So I was very determined to love the kidneys and lungs, and I had lost a battle. I had lost a battle or two, but had to win the war. So my love for acid-based chemistry definitely came in clutch for this module. It was just, you gotta play your strengths and weaknesses. That really is how to survive. But it was really much more straightforward and logical and algorithmic. It was, I don't know. It just clicked. I guess there's some things it's hard to express in words, but I feel like it's the power of the mind definitely goes a long way. If you keep going like, oh, I hate this. Oh my God, how can I do this? This is just the ugliest stuff. It will make it a lot more miserable. But so I think that was the difference with my second time with the CPR1, the heart. I was like, I am determined to love you with all my heart. I'm sorry, the dad jokes, but I'm determined to love you and I will understand you, and it helped. It really does. So definitely push yourself. So that's what I did with the heart, the kidneys, and the lungs, and then things definitely went much more smoother with CPR2. Again, my second round. See, even though I loved the kidneys and lungs the first time around, the second time it doesn't hurt, to love it a little bit more, to understand it a little bit more. So going again with the BSCE prep, things definitely smooth, like little crinkles here and there, I'd smoothed them out. For example, like the loop of Henley drugs, they weren't as elusive anymore. So I loved CPR2 so much by the end of it all that it is a serious option to consider a nephrology and for my postgraduate studies. It's something, gotta keep options open. So that was term 1, right? Now we move on to semester 2. And we start off with the Fast and Furious module, ER, endocrine and reproduction. It just came and went. But the uterine and ovarian cycles managed to win me over. It's just the synchronicity of it all made it all the more endearing. Literally like clockwork. One of my favorite modules indeed. I have a post about all the notes I've made, and it was fun. Like, I didn't go back to my awful habit from earlier on in term 1 where I was like, I make notes for every slide. No, I made some nice big picture idea notes. Making notes isn't a bad thing, but just you gotta make them in a way that's productive and helpful, and that is what really clicked with ER2. I am not a fan of embryology, but I do love the embryology associated with ER. It was very fun, and that's why it was very hard saying goodbye when it flew by like that. It was It's very compact. So that was ER. It was a nice way to break into term 2. I was a little apprehensive, like, oh, it's going to only get harder, but it was a nice start. And then we enter into DM. This DM is digestion and metabolism, like the whole tummy region and all that goes into digestion is all DM. And like how CPR 1 was very heavy with physics and physiology, here the physiology and biochem, my weaknesses, another module, an opportunity to revisit my undergrad weaknesses. This is what DM was. I'm actually really quite fond of flowcharts, so you'd think biochem would be a cakewalk. It's a double-edged sword, very objective. Like the beauty of it is that, with each step, there has to be this way, like it's set. DHAP must become D3P in glycolysis. It's very orderly. That I appreciate. But then keeping track of several intricate metabolic processes that are intertwined, that is when it gets tricky. And that's when DM becomes a little quite demanding. So again, obviously you can't really go into the questions blind, in my opinion, for this, but don't waste time with notes excessively. Familiarize yourself with a rough idea of the process, a little a general gist, and then dive into the questions. Questions. Obviously, they will be guiding stick, your guardian for any module, so especially for DM, but definitely you need to be familiar. Otherwise, you can't really go blind and try to catch up with learning the patterns. It helps, but you gotta be effective. Gotta treat the questions right to get them to treat you right, make the most of it. So that was DM, and the clinical correlates are what make the at times dry content digestible, because it's very abstract. Like, you're not seeing this happen. You hear like this becomes this, and that can go here, that can go here. If this doesn't happen, that no. So seeing what can go wrong, what normally happens, or like day-to-day applications, that's like, oh, okay, this makes sense, and then it's easier to make stories from there, right? So that was DM. I thought I would do very bad. I surprisingly did not do very bad on this module. And again, it's about the perspective. I was like, I know you aren't going to be really nice to me, but I won't give up on you. So approach, mindset makes all the difference. And we survived through DM. Kind of grew a soft spot for DM. Not so much as kidney and lungs, but I grew a soft spot. And then, hello. NB1, Neuro and Behavioral Sciences, the first set, because NB1 is the longest module, it's 10 weeks, so it's divided into NB1, 2, and 3. So NB1 was a very warm welcome to my undergrad degree. I was very excited and comfortable for this module. It was like, oh, we are going back. I can just rest. Because everyone has their module. I knew like some friends did their undergrad in biochem, so DM was like smooth sailing for them. So this was my time to shine. I was waiting for this module. I was very excited. Very neuro heavy and anatomy heavy. So though I had entered my comfort zone with this module, with cranial nerves and all, but once the tracts were introduced, I had tracts introduced in undergrad, but it's med school. Obviously, it's going to be a little bit more deeper, right? So once these tracts and stuff were introduced, and how, depending on where the injury occurred, how symptom presentation could differ drastically, that's when I was humbled. Because depending on if it's upper medulla or lower brain, everything is so different, even within the same structure. Like higher pons, lower pons, things are different. And just keeping, getting used to that, it was humbling. So I didn't feel as overwhelmed as I did with CPR, probably because of my long time affair with that beautiful hunk of jelly known as the brain. But it was frustrating at times. But I was always hungry for more with Neuro. Not just my performance, but my need to keep pushing on with the toughest concepts, because it's a matter of a little ego there, a little bit of integrity. It's like, this is my undergrad. I gotta do well in this module. So it kept me pushing and reassured me, like, by the end of it, that I need, like, Neuro is definitely going to be an option. Like, Neuro was an option while I was doing, like, as a pre-med, and even when I entered med school, I'm like, always keep Neuro as a postgraduate option. And I think what really solidified my need to keep neuro as an option, like that I can become a neurologist in the future, that I should consider that future, is that even though with the ugliest bits of neuro where I was just like screaming and just so frustrated, like it's very it's very it's a layered module. There's, you think you got it one way, and then bam, there'll be something, some disorder, some presentation that'll be totally different, and it just breaks the pattern, and you're like, okay. So even at those toughest moments and those toughest of concepts, my need to keep pushing, it reassured me that I can survive it. Because you can't just pick them, like, you can't decide your future as a specialist, like, oh, I'll do this because I like it. No. Well, you like it when it's really ugly and screaming in your face. That is how you go about it. So neuro was definitely one of those things. So I'm glad, because it'd be a little heartbreaking to have a breakup with neuro and then try to find the right one again. So that was NB1. And now NB2, it's the mix and match module. So it was anatomy for the main course and psychiatry, psychology as the entrees. Head and neck anatomy was the highlight of this module. Given the complexity of the movements the face is capable of, I was a little apprehensive because, like, if you know anything about me, I've grown to love anatomy. I was scared crazy about anatomy. I was like, I don't know anything. I've done nothing in my pre-med days with anatomy. What am I going to do? But then Dr. Malhotra, one of the hands down the best anatomy professor. So she really helped with that. But then, you grow fond of certain limbs. So I grew fond of legs because they are so straightforward. But again, the legs don't do, like, they do a lot, but they don't do much. So hence they're a little bit more simple. But upper limb was stressful. I remember, cough, cough, the brachial plexus. So you can imagine, if the arm was stressful for me, heck, the hands are capable of a lot. That's the beauty. But they're so complex as a result. So you can imagine the terror I felt for the face, because if you see my face right now, you could read it right now. So, like, everything's firing right now. So, yeah, I was very scared for the head and neck. Oh, but I realized as I was going through it, and as it was being taught so wonderfully by Dr. Malhotra, the head and neck was a beautiful union of upper and lower limb. Lots of muscles and names to keep track of, but common roots, nerves, paths to make it sink in faster. You can't help but admire the engineering and architecture of the head and neck, how everything fits in, so obscure and obsolete on its own, but so much purpose when it, like, those muscles, those structures together. That was the anatomy, and I think we wrapped it up with this module. We had little bits like the sympathetic and parasympathetic revision in NB1, but NB2 was very heavy with the anatomy. And then the psych entrees, we just had a little bit of introduction with psych, where there was a brief refresher of the intro psych from undergrad. What made it different was the heavy clinical applications of classical and operant conditioning. Gave me a deeper understanding for addiction. What made it different was that the heavy clinical applications of classical and operant conditioning. In undergrad, you learn an example here, the dogs, this, that. But you don't really go much beyond that. It's like, just know it, remember it, move on. That's it. That's undergrad psych. But now you're understanding it in the context of the field, addiction medicine, and understanding why people have trouble, giving up certain substances. Why does addiction develop? Where do triggers come from? All of these very interesting concepts was NB2, that those psych entrees. The struggle with psych was keeping track of milestones, because we were also learning developmental psychology, all those theories and certain things, that how, like, when should a child, by what time should they know how to walk, talk, this, etc., cooing, babbling, these certain things, stranger danger, all of that stuff. You have to keep track of those things, and that was personally my struggle with psych. Many theories seemed to overlap, and just keeping track of each concept's differences and similarities while keeping the big picture in focus was the main challenge of psych for me. And then we shimmy on over to NB3. This was just psych, disorders with a dash of addiction medicine. This final module, the last 3 weeks of the semester of the neuro module, it was really a culmination of sorts. This final module really brought the challenge of psych in NB2 to the forefront. Like, the similar yet different issue happening. The disorders are similar yet different, but you had to keep the big picture, the core feature of each cluster or categories of disorders in mind. So NB3, you learn to read the STEM. Sorry to say, you learn to read the STEM, not the lecture. Practice that is all you do for NB3. If other modules you could go off with, like, we can practice a little less, we can skip out on a few practice questions. NB3, no. Because, I don't know, for me, going through the lectures, it was just a lot, too much overlap. The only way these disorders sit in your head as distinct, separate entities, yet fit in the interconnected map in relation to each other, is through questions. The STEM will tell you all. The STEM will get you familiar with the disorder. So do the STEM, do the practice questions, but no shortcuts. Obviously spend time on lectures just to go over things that you keep on struggling with. There's resources that are shared thanks to, like, students have made tables before. Do what works for you. Get familiar. Study smart, because, honey, studying hard is not an option when you are juggling studying for NB3 with a lab exam, a clinical skills exam, and the behemoth that is the BSCE. You have everything come on your plate towards the end of the semester, so you cannot fall behind. You have to juggle. You have to juggle like you've never juggled before. So study smart. If you hadn't given up your stubborn ideas of like your pre-med ways of studying, you will be forced to shed it now, because there is no way in heck you survive making pages and pages of notes, barely doing practice questions, and passing through these exams. You have to do practice questions. So that, my dears, was year one. That was semester 2, semester 1. All done. I can't believe it. Even thinking back on it now, so soon. Everything's a little raw. I'm just amazed. You underestimate yourself, but people have done it. People have survived. Our seniors have survived, and yeah, now I understand why they were like, it's okay. You'll do it. You'll be fine. You have been doing a year's worth. Every module, you've been doing test after test after test, exam after exam, quiz after quiz. You are a seasoned med student relatively at this point. You're not a little newbie pre-med, just, walked into med school at in the first few days. You are used to the pressure. You are used to the stress. And I think that is the biggest gift MS1 has really given. That you have thicker skin. You don't start running around like a headless chicken when you see all these giant stems with so many bits of info, with this heart rate, that. It's okay. You know how to hone, and your honing skills have improved. They still have a long way to go. I know I have lots to learn even now, obviously, but it's just impressive how better test takers SGU has made us, thanks to these so many different forms of assessment. So, speaking of assessment, I'm going to hop into now the second part of this little episode, the evolution of my study technique. Everyone has their own. I'm going to talk about mine, because that is something I still am just left my mouth hanging wide open, like, what the heck happened? Whoa, thank goodness. So, semester 1 was me just go over your lecture slides, slide by slide, and write summaries, make notes, undergrad days, and then do questions. See the problem? It was not much multitasking happening there. It's like, do this, and then do the implementing, the actual execution at the end. Becomes a little tricky, because you kind of feel awkward going to profs, but you never feel awkward. Even if it's the last day, profs are very understanding. They've seen it all. But it feels a little weird being like, that lecture from the first day, I don't get this. And it's like 2 days before the exam. So you can see how I clearly learned this method isn't the best in the long run, ever. So that was semester 1. Lectures, notes, and then do questions. done. Semester 2, ER, old habits die hard. So, notes were on point. As I said, remember, like, the notes were much more big picture, not little keeping every slide in mind. I took the main pulp of each lecture and made notes on that. So they were much more on point, much better, much more active learning with these notes, I must say. Less passive compared to term 1. But ER onwards, I was like, okay, I worked hard. I feel already burnt out. Why did I not, I was expecting a bit more. I did decent, but I could have done better. So then I was like, okay, don't fall behind with weekly questions with ER onwards. Like, every module, DM, NB1, NB2, NB3, do not fall behind with weekly questions. Be more present and on top with first passes of lecture content so that weekly quizzes don't seem so foreign. Like, they should seem familiar. They shouldn't be like, what the heck is this? What language am I looking at? No, they should be familiar. You can miss note taking, but don't compromise with questions and practice. I still made flowcharts and tables for big picture concepts. I love those things. They're my babies, okay? I've used some term 1 tables I've made for the BSCE prep. So I'm those are my babies, okay? There's some things I just can't let go of. So those things, obviously, do if time permits and how your schedule allows. But, like, I noticed that ER onwards, it was more with questions, and then these kinds of flow charts, these big picture note taking, that was more of a last final touch-up review of the material when and if I had plowed through all the questions, reinforced things well, basically. And NB onwards was the big, like, revolution. It was the enlightenment for me. Group studying. I am forever grateful for now a great friend to take initiative and bring up this idea to do post reads of challenging NB1 tracts and lectures all together. So we, like, before post reads, pre reads, they were all on my own. And sometimes I wouldn't do it because, no one's there holding me accountable. I know I'm a grown up woman, okay, but you get tired. And so now having this friend bring up this idea, and then now it was like, if she's doing it, I gotta show up for her. I can't let her down. And, like, same with, like, she can't let me down. So this growing sense of accountability basically allowed us to really become much better studiers, or I became a much better studier. We were bouncing off ideas, explanations, and the craziest, sometimes the dirtiest, but the craziest of stories we developed. It was quite the strategy to tackle large volumes of information. And as annoying as it seemed when the suggestions were put forward by staff and academic advisors when we first started back in January 2020, like, oh, group study, I was like, ugh, no thank you, I'm fine, I'm better than that. Like, it wasn't that, but I was just like, it's not my cup of tea. I don't think it'll ever be my cup of tea, because, again, I was very stubborn. It's like, I study my way. It doesn't work like that. But eventually, this late imagine, in the last module, it caved, because there's a lot of information and you can't do it all on your own. So group studying did make that difference. I can't speak for my friend, but I, for one, definitely had an improvement with my performance, my marks. The study approach tapped into my strength of being a good listener. I'm an audio learner. If I hear and discuss something, it fits and sinks in sooner than if I write about it. So I am looking forward to see how this group studying carries us through one of the most challenging terms of med school. I've heard that this upcoming term, like the first half of year 2 is very challenging on its own, but first half of year 2 is quite something. And it's a lot more, ethics and all that. So it's a lot more on the social sciences side of it. At least the first term 3-4 is a bit that I'm a little nervous about that, because it's not my strong suit. So hopefully this technique really helps us push through. So one little thing I do want to add is that accept the dynamic nature of med school and how you learn. The sooner you learn that lesson, the sooner you get the fruits of your labor. Forcing yourself to constantly adapt now, I know, is premature coming from a soon-to-be MS2, but nonetheless, 2, 4, 6 years from now, be prepared to hear this message again and again in my posts, in my episodes. I'm sorry it's coming, because it's that important. So forcing yourself to constantly adapt is the best way to break yourself in and keep sailing through this field. There is no room for staticity, or whatever that specific word is, but there's no room for rigidity. It's constantly evolving. You're dealing with humans, you're dealing with people. You can't expect it to be uniform at all. So be ready to flow. And finally, in the last bit, I want to wrap things up with the top 3 things I've taken from my time as an MS1. So, number 1, a degree is a piece of paper that gets you a seat at the table, but it's the work experience that adds the weight and gets you the job time and time again. So in the same way, the lectures, the theory, they provide you with the tools to take on the questions that will cement in the theory. It primes you, I would hope, for the real deal, you know? Of course, you won't get all the pieces of information, but like it gets you used to looking for key features, familiarizing yourself with patterns. Like obviously when like you're doing rotations or in residency, you're not going to be like, okay, this is male, like you're not going to be told that information. You're going to be told this bit, and like there'll be other bits you'll find after further investigation. But you know, getting yourself familiar will help you bam 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 lay out like 10 different differentials and go on from there, you know? So that is why questions are so important. So important. Number 2, do what works for you and keep evolving. No study technique is absolute perfection. Add on it, modify it, supplement stuff. Anki is something I didn't use at all during my first year at all. I know. The shock, the horror. No. There's no severe regret. I was fine. You can survive without it, but it's not something I would say like, oh, like I survived, I'm never going to touch it. No. I do think it is a useful supplement. I felt a little stressed that Anki, you know, it's all part of the med school culture, pre-med culture. I was like, am I doing something wrong? Like, my marks tell a whole different story though. So it was very anxiety, right? Like, you know, I was just like, oh, I could be doing better. Like sure, I'm doing well, but I could be doing more, like, you know, better. But no, put that aside. Do what works, but don't disregard something permanently. It might come in handy later down the road. Like, I made the mistake of being like, group study. Who the hell does that? I'm not going to do that. Some people do that. I'm not that person. In the end, it saved my butt. So now, Christmas break. Sure, like, you know, I'm relaxing. I promise I'm relaxing. But, you know, I'm going to spend a little bit of that time to, you know, chummy up with Anki because I know it's going to come in handy. And we're only going to be building on more and more and more. So, yeah, that is my plan. And one last thing regarding this whole study and evolving thing that I'm mentioning, number 2, this lesson, is that consider, like regarding the studies techniques to consider down the road if you haven't already, group studying, it doesn't have to be a club. It could just be one other person. Just give it a try one time. Like, you know, you get the Costco samples. Do a Costco samples of group studying. It could just be one other person, like how I did. Only caveat with this approach is that come prepared. Like, you don't have to be like, oh, I already covered the lecture. I'm just basically, no. Then you'll kind of find it not as beneficial. Come a little bit primed. Don't be a blank slate that doesn't have nothing to contribute. Just the reiteration, the stories, the tricks as you guys plow through the lecture together, they will stick because up till now, group studying is the closest thing to active learning, personally, I've ever gotten to. Like, I guess it was my own Anki in a way. And it really helps out when you're weak in one area and your study buddy is a champ in another. Like, how do you think I survived CPR 1 revision? I was dreading it. It was my study mate. She was like, no, we are going to deal with it. We are going to go head on with the ugly bits and then relax up with the nicer bits. So I'd really definitely give it a try. Do that Costco sample for me. Come on. And the last thing, number 3, what I got from MS1, year 1, it was compete with yourself. I know some people might be like, oh, I don't compete, or other people might be like, but it's how I get along. No, compete with yourself. That is the only way to stay sane. Don't underestimate your ability to retain information, but even more so, like, don't underestimate your ability to stay composed. You might think you're the only one put the walls aside and talk, and you'll see the whole class is in the same boat. Cough, cough. Another reason why to group study, it's therapeutic, okay? Group study, I'm like a huge promoter of that because I'm a convert, okay? I wasn't about it, but as you can see. So don't ever feel alone, because that's like a big hunk of coal to the burnout fire. You will feel burnt out. I'm not saying no one will. You will feel burnt out. So don't compete with yourself. Do not don't compete with others. Do not. It will just make it all the more worse. Our composure during pressure, or ability to appear like, oh, we're fine, that is one of our biggest assets. But it becomes such a big weakness as well, especially with the Zoom school format. Like, it's not supposed to be this way, and it's already lonely enough as it is. It's overwhelming enough as it is. So keep your cool under pressure, but it's okay to break down, talk, hash it out. Otherwise, it's going to come back in a much more grotesque form. So deal with it in whatever way you need to, but definitely deal with it. Reach out to staff. Office hours are a great opportunity for clarifications, as well as just venting. It's just nice. And then, hearing the profs kind of put things in perspective, it definitely helps. Take advantage of clubs, Global Touch in Medicine, where you get to listen to people in the field share stories, or even yoga. These things help you keep perspective. Gone are the pre-med days where the cutthroat competition to get in existed. You are in. No need to prove yourself in that way anymore. Now is the time to show that you are more than just your expertise and technicalities, that you just get the marks. You are more than just that. You are human. Strive for better, not for perfection, please. So, yeah, those are my little 3 things. Stay human, stay grounded, keep on evolving, group studying, and questions, and just enjoy your time. I think I've heard from countless friends, well-wishers, live in the moment. I've only kind of learned that in the moment, like this thing now. So live in the moment, keep your eye on the target, but don't lose perspective. And these things will all make you a better doctor. I know a lot of wishy-washy, cheesy stuff at this point. You'll know it, you'll experience it, and when you do, definitely do comment and, message me and let me know how it's going. But MS1, it changes you. It makes you something you never thought you could be, but it's all for the better. And you really do earn that 25% MD. It's just, it makes you excited for what's to come. A little scared, but excited, and you'll just be so amazed, again, at the thickness of your skin, how much you have improved with dealing with pressure, and how much you are capable of in the future. So thank you for listening to my review of how my experiences and how this first year of med school was. I can't even believe I'm here. So excited to, move on ahead with people that are so incredible. This kind of grit and tenacity you don't get to see everywhere. You really don't. So I'm really privileged and honored, and I'm so glad I have people that listen to this, and I'll keep you guys posted, and hope you enjoy the journey along with me. Thank you. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Bye, guys.